everybody. This is Nathaniel Provencio with my good friend Dr. Worcester. What's up, man?
Hey, everybody. Good to see you, Nathaniel.
And by way of Houston, but by way of California, we got Eric Sheninger, man, like the digital guru of all time, right? I mean, like Eric, man, thank you very much for joining us. I know you're exceedingly busy, but the world is changing, bro. This AI stuff, this tech stuff, man, it's just I've got to figure it out. We got to figure it out, and that's why we have you on the Community Connection. How you doing, my friend?
Doing great, but I challenge the notion of guru because, especially in this AI world, there's no gurus, and I by no means am a guru in anything. But hopefully, I'll kind of flesh that out today during our conversation.
Well, we're all gurus, I guess. I mean, maybe, it's something. We just got to kind of keep polishing it out. I tell you what, man, we had a podcast the other day, and we were talking about my son and how I wish he loved school, but he just doesn't. He's in high school. He is taking several AP classes. He's got some dual enrollment classes. And every time he comes home, the only thing that he wants to do is just spend time with his own passions. He's into really interesting things. He's into like fashion design. He's into music production. He's into just some really cool stuff, but all of the things that he's interested in, it's just nothing's happening in his classroom. And as a dad, public school dad, a proud advocate of public schools, like I get it. I know that our public schools are working really, really hard, doing the best that they can, but I'm starting to kind of like see some disgruntledness with my kid. And Eric, I remember watching a really awesome TEDx talk that you put on several years ago about this same subject. And I'm just curious, man, what are schools doing? How are schools evolving, especially in the public school area, of getting our kids connected to their passions? Should they be connecting schools to their passions, or should it just be the basics? Like where are we doing things right and where are we doing things wrong? I hope that question makes sense.
Yeah, man, you really went into the vault. That TEDx talk was like 11 years ago. So thanks for making me feel really old.
That's all right,
And
man.
and I think that, your son is no different than my daughter who's finishing up school. And, it's not that she doesn't have caring or passionate teachers. It's that school is something that's done to kids.
Mhm.
It's not something that they want to do. Same thing we could say about professional development education. It's often done to educators. And, if we look at, I'm a big fan of a lot of books outside education, but I think to the work of Dan Pink and
Mm,
Drive, and he
Yeah.
talks about mastery, autonomy, and purpose.
that's
That
right.
book, that book spoke to me like no other. Why are we intrinsically motivated to get better, to do certain things? It's because, excuse the pun, we have that drive
Yeah.
because we see that purpose, we have that autonomy, and we want to master, you know, competencies that are important to us, that are going to help us be better people, whether professionally or personally. So I think in a knowledge economy, which is just compounded by things like artificial intelligence, the basics, I mean, let's be honest. The basics, yeah, we might get that in elementary and maybe early middle, but what then do we get that's in the curriculum from a student's perspective that's actually going to help them be successful? If you talk to kids, they want to know, how do I trade stocks? How do I
Yeah.
build a diversified portfolio? Wait a minute, what is a diversified portfolio?
Yeah.
You know, how do I fix things in my home so I don't have to go and spend money on a fix-it person, which that is a challenge of mine because I have to shell out a lot of money because that's not what I was taught. So I think there is a responsibility to get through curriculum mandates because states and maybe not so much the federal government are always going to oppose it.
Yeah.
But if we don't build in that relevance, that purpose, that meaning, we can't compete with the cell phone. We can't compete with the interactions that students have with each other. If we don't bring that relevance in, it's going to be very difficult to not only get kids to see the meaning, but also to improve outcomes.
So we had this conversation with a couple of guests before. I'm on Twitter and I'm on like Instagram and stuff, and like I have a lot of like I just looking at seeing like what school stuff is trending or whatever. And Eric, I've noticed that there's been, at least on my feed, maybe it's because I look at something more than 3 seconds, then I start getting all these other things. A lot of private charter schools, magnet schools are really, really branding themselves. And I know this is something that you've written about they're branding themselves with AI and how these certain conversations that you and I are just having, this is their bread and butter. This is kind of like their modus operandi. Like, a kid can have his own learning pathway. A kid can come in and like trade stocks or start a Airbnb. They can go crazy, and these are like 5-year-olds, right? And like AI is just letting them go on all these different paths. And so I see that and I'm intrigued. But then again, like we had Dr. Worcester, we had like Mike Schmoker on the other day, who's more talking about the importance of like an E.D. Hirsch kind of like philosophy, really knowing the basics and how that's important, and just reading and writing and reading and writing. So I see this kind of paradox of like, even with my own son, like I want him to read more, but I also want him to follow his passions. Like I want him to be able to be excellent with the basics, but I also want him to innovate. So Eric, where do we find like this balance between making sure we have literate, well-read students, but then also have that autonomy, mastery, and purpose, and those own kind of like learning pathways that kind of make everything come to life? So how do we bridge the two, or is there a place to bridge the two?
That's a great question. And one of the challenges we have in education is some people see things as black and white. There is no black and white in this world.
Mm.
There is no best way, and there's no such thing as a best practice. If there
Thank you, Eric.
was, we'd be doing
Appreciate
it with
that.
we'd be doing it with a high degree of fidelity and getting amazing results.
Yeah.
I
Yep.
am very skeptical of any entity, organization, or person who says you must do A, B, and C. Because guess what? That flies in the face with what we know about learning. All students learn differently. And there is no one right way to learn. There is no one right way to build a school. There are effective ways to teach, to learn, and to lead. And I think we have to look at what are we trying to accomplish with our students, with our communities, and that is going to vary from place to place to place. Let's go back to the basics. Well, what if students are already competent in the basics, and
Mm.
then we keep pummeling them with those basics? Then they go into the real world and they flounder.
Yep.
Now, let's go to the opposite. Yeah, let's look at AI, let's look at innovation. Well, if you can't read or write
Yeah.
or understand math, so I think it's how we marry both entities, but it's going to look different.
Mm.
And that's one concept that my co-author and I really emphasized and personalize. If all students have to do the same thing at the same time, the same way,
Yep.
they're not going to learn. But
Yep.
how do all students get what they need when and where they need it to learn? That means some students might need more targeted support on literacy, on numeracy. Some students might need more emphasis on the personal, impersonalized. So I think we have to get away from it's my way or the highway. This is what I believe. Because let me just be honest, it's the end of the day. I'm
Yeah.
loose-lipped. It does not matter what I believe. It doesn't matter what any other talking head believes because they're not our students. They're not the teachers and the administrators working with those students. So we have to work as best as we can to
Mm.
clear the runway so schools can do the right work. And I think that's what's really, really important. Now, we can influence, we can share our opinions, but we should never dictate that there is one best or preferred way, in my
Yeah.
humble opinion.
Humble opinion. Well said, man. We have a lot of Worcester and I have a lot of guests, some excellent guests, and it's very interesting the take, the pedagogical kind of like platforms that all of our experts that are having on. Some are like, we need to differentiate. Some are like, no, differentiation has no evidence base back to it. Or, we need to use more, technology or whatever. And like, no, there's no research. And there's research to justify everything, right? But at the end of the day, my son I don't feel and daughter may not be getting the best of their experiences. So my research as a father is what's happening to my son and my daughter. That's the closest research that I have. Dr. Worster, what do you think, my friend?
First, Eric, I want to appreciate, because I hate that term best practices. Hate it with a passion. And I love using the word effective practices. So anyway, thank you for affirming that. Eric, we have talked a little bit about things you stand for. I'd love to hear, and I want to jump into a technology and how our teachers are implementing that. But first, before we get into that, Eric, what's your background? Our listeners might not know about you. What is your background in education, and how did you come to this passion with technology?
Well, I'm not going to go into depth about my reality TV days, which was brought up today by a teacher here in
Oh,
California. So we're going to ignore that part of my
now you have
educational
to. Now
journey.
you have to.
No, you're
However,
not. We're going to talk about it.
however, and it actually does have a connection. So I was a science teacher and I became an administrator, and I had a fixed mindset. And when I was chasing a student through my building because he broke our cell phone policy, he thanked me for creating a school out of what should be a jail. And you can go back and see me on a show called The Principal's Office on True TV way back when,
Really?
and you will see kind of how I was reprimanding students for that. That student voice and that bold sort of, stance kind of rocked my world in the right way and kind of set me on the path to learn how to unlearn and relearn. And then I kind of got on Twitter when I lived in Staten Island, Nathaniel,
Statin.
not Long Island, as we
Oh, gotcha.
discussed off
Did I screw
air.
that one up? It's
You
all the
did.
same.
You
It's
did. Okay. Okay. Do not tell Staten Islanders, Long Island's, it's all the same, because then, yeah, not going to be good. But when I got on Twitter in 2009, that's when I kind of had the blindfold ripped off. I had my aha moment, and that's when I started seeing what was possible. And the key was, here are ideas that I was never exposed to because I was in my traditional silo, which often is a school for a student, or a system for a teacher and administrator. And when I broke free from my silo, I kind of saw technology as a way to be a multifaceted approach to increase engagement. And I say multifaceted because we still want to turn a talk. We want think, pair, share. We
Yep,
want
yep,
face-to-face communication. We want kids writing. We want them doing independent work.
yep.
But by using technology, we saw ways to integrate tools aligned to reviews of prior learning, checks for understanding, closure, tried and true practices. But then we also saw it as a way to share. And why sharing our practices, what we learned was going back to that there is no best practice, what we learned was people appreciated the insight from people who were doing the work, my teachers, to see how they could take these effective practices and either replicate or build upon them and make them more effective within their context. So
Mhm.
that's kind of how I got into it. A kid told me I sucked. I got on social media, learned lessons from being a reality TV star in education space, and voila, that is the recipe to become, I guess, in Nathaniel's words, a guru.
A guru, right?
Just love
Gurus are
to
still
hear that
learning.
we suck.
That's awesome.
So,
How many times sets you on a path?
Yeah. Staten Island. So your school must have been named like PS 187 or something, right? Or PS
okay.
227.
So I'm a Jersey guy, born and bred, but
Yeah.
when I met my wife, yeah, they PS3 and
Yeah.
PS26
There
were
you
the
go.
schools that my kids went to. Very
I,
good.
ne- I never understood why they don't just name them after something like a place or a region, like those Manhattan,
Numbers
New
are so
York
small.
schools.
Well,
Yeah.
You ain't changing
there's a lot of schools in New York City, so that's a lot of names. It's easier just to do PS number, 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 number.
Okay, so I'm going to take a little bit of a detour. So let's talk about that because I believe, right, you wrote a book called Branded. Is that correct?
I did.
So
I
how do
did.
you brand when you've got PS all over, 1 to 1,000? How do you set some school? How does schools set themselves apart? Like
Yeah, so
the business
so
world does a great job with this. Schools, not so much.
Yeah, so I think we have to differentiate between a brand in a business sense and an
Hmm.
education sense.
Okay.
In the business world, a brand is to sell,
Mm-hmm.
plain and simple. In the education realm, a brand is meant to tell, to
Hmm.
build powerful relationships. And, what we learned early on was that we were telling our story. We didn't even know it was a bona fide strategy, but we told our story. And what happened organically was that our brand presence evolved. A brand presence about, hey, here is how you can integrate technology in a purposeful way aligned to Bloom's taxonomy, depth of knowledge. Here's how you could personalize through the flipped approach when appropriate and maximize time in class to differentiate. Here is what a really sound, well-defined 3, 4, 5 point rubric, not an arbitrary scoring guide, can look like. So you
Hmm.
can allow students to choose the best way to demonstrate learning aligned to the standard learning target, et cetera, et cetera. So by sharing, we added context. That context actually became a catalyst for additional conversations. And I
Hmm.
still remember that when the light bulb went off for me when we were on 1010 Wins, a news station, the most listened to news station in America.
Yeah.
And the reporter who was local did a story on us on Twitter. So that aired, and later that day, my secretary pulls me out and says, "Hey, Eric, CBS Channel 2 is here, and they want to do a story on how you're using Twitter and how the teacher's using Twitter." And that brand presence, that telling, that's when I got stereotyped or branded as Principal Twitter
Hmm.
and as the digital principal and all this stuff.
Yeah.
But I think the simple case is, we want to improve the work, share the work, and celebrate the work. And
Hmm.
we need to do that more than ever right now. Because
Absolutely.
if you don't tell your story, someone else will. And when
Yeah.
someone else tells your story, it's not as accurate as we want. I see amazing things in schools in my role as a coach. And sometimes the depressing part is I see it, but I can only do so much to share it.
Hmm.
So we have to be more cognizant of what does really good pedagogy look like? What does it mean to pair the basics with
Hmm.
an innovative lens, going
Yeah.
back to how we opened our conversation? And the more we can use images and videos, add context, because here's what teachers tell me, Eric, we know the why and we don't want more work. We want
Hmm.
to know how can we do it and what can it look like?
Yes.
Our communities want to know how are schools doing it effectively? What does it look like? And we can't be afraid. We kind of have this bunker mentality with social media,
Hmm.
but I think it is our responsibility, anyone that has a stake in education, to really grab that microphone and share the effective, not best, the effective practices that
Yeah.
are taking place.
Eric,
Eh,
when I hear the
Yep.
term branded, and the thing that I differ on this, but to
Yep.
me, it seems incredibly artificial. And I wouldn't want my kids to attend a school that's branding themselves. Now, you talked about telling a story. I think that's great. When I think of branding, I think there's somebody selling me something, and they're selling me that thing because the thing that it is isn't good enough. So for those people out there like me who hear you're branding as a leader, you're branding as a school, and it just seems so almost condescending or against what I want to accomplish. What do you say to us?
Oh boy, I got a lot to say. First off, you kind of, you might, if you like the whole knocking on best practice, let me now tackle the term buy-in, which I hate. You
Mm.
should not have to sell a better way to do things. Buy-in is an extrinsic means to persuade and force people to do things that they might not want to do. We
Mm.
need people to embrace. And how do you embrace doing things that are better? You do it by showcasing value. And that's what a brand presence is about. What is the value behind our strategies? Now, words are toxic.
Yeah.
Let me throw another great, like, buy into me is toxic. Let me throw another one out there.
Let's do it.
Rigor.
Oh,
Wait,
that's a great word.
Oh,
Oh, ooh.
now
fidelity,
here's
Al?
the
You
thing.
like fidelity?
Oh my God, fidelity.
Fidelity is a good one, man. That's the F bomb. You dropped the F bomb first.
Yeah, so we got rigor, we got fidelity, we got data driven. Oh
Data
my
driven's
goodness,
a good
data
one. I
Uh-huh.
driven.
like that.
So here's the thing. it doesn't matter how we feel about words, it's more about the meaning. And if you don't like the word brand, then I think that there might not have been enough work to kind of create the underlying conditions of what a brand really means.
Hmm.
A brand presence in education is how a teacher meets the diverse needs of a learner. It's how a school system provides relevant, meaningful, practical, professional learning that's job embedded, ongoing, as opposed to one and done. It's about how we use data from a data enhanced standpoint to group, regroup, target instruction to differentiate. It's about how we begin to maximize time that we have with our kids to ensure that they're learning using rotational models, must do, may do, playlists, choice boards, flipped lessons, asynchronous. And the whole brand piece is not
Hmm.
saying, hey, I'm branding my school. That I think is not necessarily, my opinion, the best way to go about it.
Mhm.
It's let the work build the brand for you. And here's the thing,
Love that.
when you think of your child's school, your alma mater that you went to for college, when you think about, what you purchase, all those things, why do you think about that?
Hmm.
Because it gives you a message. It makes you feel good. We want school systems to make kids, first and foremost, feel good about the time that they spend. We want communities to feel good, even when they're paying ridiculous property taxes.
Yeah.
We want staff to feel good that they are valued, that they are respected, that they are supported. So, like any word, it's our actions to create that working definition in a way that when you hear it, something positive comes to mind as opposed to negative.
Yes, as
You know,
long as there's authenticity behind it and it's not a show.
Right.
well, yeah.
And
And Eric,
here's
That's what I think I have seen happen is I've branded something and it's an artifice. It
well,
is
yeah, that's a car salesman. That,
yeah,
and so where, and that's your school is branded whether you like it or not. So every time you have if you have that front office secretary who's a jerk, that person, that parent who just got yelled at by whatever, and they're going to go out and they're going to be a missionary for that work. They're going to go out and brand it. If the teachers are in a it's a toxic culture, you don't have to brand anything. The students will brand that stuff for you when they go and share all those things on social media.
right. But you
The
telling them all this is the best place for learning doesn't negate them thinking
yep,
it's not. And that's what I'm saying. Like you can
if
go
the principal is saying this is the best space for
right.
learning and it's disingenuous, well,
Yes.
then that brand
yep,
will show really, really quick. This principal's a liar, and I'll just go to School Digger or
Yep.
gradeschools.org and I'll put in my own
yep.
brand. But
So
when
again,
you're
So,
living it,
telling your
when
story is
you're
important, and I agree that telling your story is important. It's when it becomes artificial, and that's
yeah,
the term.
so I'm going to comment on that,
Yep.
but from now on, I want to set some new ground rules that I'm only going to call on the person with the best first name to respond as we
Talking
go.
about
this
So,
guy.
so Eric, it's interesting you say that because there are a lot of artificial brands out there. And not that I'm right, but here's what I do on my free time. When I see schools and leaders, current or ex, talking about branding, the first thing that I do is I look up their achievement scores in their
Absolutely.
district. And I'm
appreciate it.
telling you right now, they do not have to be the best.
Sure.
But if you are in the bottom third in your respective state,
Yes.
I think we have to take things with a grain of salt.
Yep.
It's not that relationships are not important. It's not about, we want to create, optimal learning environments. But here's the thing, everyone, if you're going to go out there and do all this stuff and build this quote unquote brand presence, it better be the whole kit and caboodle.
Yeah.
Yes.
It better be the social emotional aspect. It better be the relationships. It better be fidelity of the curriculum. It
Yeah.
better be
Rigor.
rigorous learning. Yeah, there we go. So you catch it on. But it also better lead to improved learner outcomes.
Yeah.
And I talk about outcomes now because I believe that there has to be a healthy mix of qualitative and quantitative. But
Yep.
I'm glad you brought that up, Eric, because there is a lot of smoke and mirrors out there
Yeah.
with brand. And don't even get me started about smoke and mirrors on terms of technology,
Mm,
because you asked me kind of before about here, and I see all the time, yeah, we're using technology effectively. Well, no, if it's the adult that's using it, and two, if it's just being as a substitution for
Yep.
low-level tasks,
Yep.
and that's where, when we really look at the convergence of increasing thinking and increasing relevant application, how is technology being used by kids in ways
yeah.
to learn that they couldn't without it?
So here's an example for you
Really?
guys. I was in a school, I guess about a couple months ago, and their brand, ready, was excellence in 21st century learning. I was like, okay, we whatever that means. All right, but that was their brand. That was their tagline.
Word salad.
Word salad, brother. Like the golden corral of
Yep.
of like mission statements, right? So I'm excited about going in, and I'm looking around, and they're giving me the little tour, and they were very proud about all the computers that were purchased with ESSER funds, like $1 billion worth of technology that was purchased during the ESSER fund, kind of stuff that was going on. And dude, I'm walking around and like all I'm seeing is babysitting. I'm seeing digital babysitting, right? I mean, they got like the kids are there, and it's just like they're just compliant. And I'm like, man, come, this is. And then I'm like, I see this in so many schools. Like I see this in so many schools where the resources outpaced the reason of how to effectively use good technology to bring standards to life, to make sure that students had some kind of agency, autonomy, mastery, and purpose of their learning. And it's just mother's milk. It's just compliance, man. So what are you doing? Like, what do you see? What can you do to help schools that maybe have the resources, but they're not really like putting it together? Eric, what would you suggest, man? Where do they start?
So are you referring to this Eric or the
Sheninger,
other Eric? Okay,
because Dr.
just
Worcester
to
is
make
kind of
sure.
on my Dr. Worcester's on my shit list right now because he's is against brand. So anyway, we have to talk off pace with that one.
No, no,
So
no, no. He's not against brand. He asked some very
he
critical
does, yeah, he does.
questions to
Eric get it?
Eric gets it.
unpack fallacies that are often connected with brand. So I think that now you got to repeat the question.
I don't know. So a good thing we can edit all this stuff out. This is we have a good time, Eric. I wish you could spend longer
You
with us.
don't got to edit it out. Keep it raw.
Relaxation.
We do a little stuff. But the where are schools? What do they need to do? They've got the resources,
Got it. Yeah.
but they don't have the reason. How do you bring that together?
Yeah, and I think that that really comes when we think about the resources, and we have to be again cognizant of the environment. We've been brainwashed for a
Mm,
sense. We've been brainwashed by, you mentioned, all the money that was spent on technology.
mm,
Well, what came with that? All these lofty claims that this technology is going to personalize learning. You're going to have this data. You're going to have kids working at their own pace and blah, blah, blah. So you had snake oil
yeah,
sales tactics
right.
come in.
Yep.
And that's another fallacy that we tackled in Personalize, putting all students on a device where they're using a fill in the blank, this adaptive learning tool, where there's no talking, no discourse. That is impersonal.
Yeah.
And I think that, we see a lot of, talk these days about too much technology for students.
Hmm.
And I think we have to look at, and I don't want to say balance because I've been kind of put in my place on that. That's why I like the term purposeful.
Mm,
It's looking for that moment in time where the technology is going to represent that fundamental improvement. And, I think when we look at our device, you know, I kind of love when I see PBL, it's great. But when
yeah.
all kids are doing the same copy and paste Google slide presentation, where
Mhm.
there is no defined rubric, it drives me crazy.
Yeah.
So I think that's a great example. If depending on the device, if it has these great capabilities to create, okay, well, do a really sound tier one lesson. Then maybe integrate some cooperative learning to dive into the concepts. I love the jigsaw method.
Hmm.
And then work to, okay, how do that lesson, how do those learning activities lead to what they're going to do with this project? Is there clarity in the project? Is there success criteria? Is there a sound rubric? Are there guidelines for responsibility for students? And then if you got all those in place, the beauty of technology is allow them to select the right tool for the right task to demonstrate understanding. That takes pressure off the teacher because the teacher then doesn't have to use the tech. The
Yeah.
teacher has to do what they were trained to do, assess learning.
Yeah.
And I also think that the key with technology is how our leaders model expectations. We don't see that a lot. Now, I work with a lot of leaders, and I always tell them, don't expect others to do what you're not willing to do or have not done yourself.
Hmm.
Yes.
If you're talking about teacher clarity, are you modeling that in your faculty meetings, in your professional learning? If you are talking about discourse, turn and talk, are you integrating that in your faculty meetings, in
Yeah.
professional learning? If you're going to talk about implementing closure, which by the way, I'm saying things I don't see consistently in my
Closure's
thousands.
the hardest.
Okay, well, number one, integrate it into faculty meetings or professional learning, or
Yeah.
go into a classroom and model for the teacher.
Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely.
So I think with any strategy or tool, it comes down to how do we support? The why is so drawn out.
Yes.
People get all excited about the why, then they go back to the reality, and here's what happens. They're on this high, and then they crash down because then they're looking around and they're like, okay, well, that sounded great in theory,
Yep. Yep.
but practicality, how the heck do I do this with a class of 35 or 40 kids? How do I do this
Yeah.
if kids aren't bringing their Chromebooks charged? How do I do this if there is, pressure from colleagues to maintain the status quo? How do I do this if my administration doesn't get it? So these are all things that we have to tackle if we want to, whether it's technology or anything else, to make sure that there's a return on learning, because that's the whole key. We invest in time, resources, ideas, PD. What is that return on learning? Whether it's technology, PD, new curriculum, and I don't think we ask that question enough.
Hmm. Hmm. I agree.
I, like you said, why can be easy. It's the what. It's how do I make this passion happen? Eric, I was a instructional technology resource teacher about 20 years ago. I am a firm believer in the promise of technology. I do not believe that promise has been kept. I just when I was dreaming back when I started out about what technology could do, I envisioned a school system or schools without grade levels where students were just progressing because you had all of these technological innovations that could help you move forward based on what you knew. We're still seeing kids in grade level going through the same set of standards. What kinds of things, I guess, did you think technology would be doing that it hasn't? And what promise do you see in the future?
Oh my goodness. Well,
He's got good questions, man. He's
it,
got good
it,
questions.
well, good questions to go along with a great first name. It is, I think, here's the thing. I can't say that what it can't do that I wish it would, because I've seen examples of the amazing things that it can do. Whether it was through the lens of my teachers, we were the first school in New Jersey to bring your own device 16 years ago, and we improved achievement in the process. We decreased discipline. We increased attendance, graduation rates. We did virtual courses, completely immersive virtual courses back in 2011. We were using micro credentials to acknowledge the professional learning of our teachers. We had students taking courses from MIT,
Mm.
Harvard, Stanford, open courseware, and
Yep.
we used elective credit and we personalized their transcripts after they showed us what they could learn, even though we didn't have those same courses at our school. And now, I'm seeing teachers using self-graded Canvas and Google Forms for exit tickets to give kids immediate feedback. I've seen it all, but the challenge is consistency and continuity.
Mm.
That I just laid out the secret to change. consistency and continuity.
Yeah.
We can all point to high level examples. One thing that I take pride in my work is I love sharing evidence.
Mm,
I want to share evidence, and I have artifact libraries from all of my projects, high level stuff that no one picks apart because it really is synonymous with effective pedagogy. So I think what we need to do a better job of, and this connects to the branding piece,
mm,
to the rigor piece, to the fidelity piece, all this is how do we show more of those high level examples aligned to standards? How data is being used to enhance the process, connecting it to not what people call PLCs, where it's really just common planning time,
right.
but to actual professional learning communities. How do we provide students opportunities that they could not have? Technology can break down barriers. It can provide students with experiences. Yeah, it might not be the same, but a virtual field trip, talking to an expert. Okay, great. So what? What do they do with it then? That connects to the pedagogy,
Mhm.
alignment with the curriculum. So it's not that it's not being done, it's being done in isolated pockets.
Yeah.
And another challenge is it's our inability at scale in districts, schools, and organizations to identify those high level examples, to provide teachers and administrators
Mhm.
with tiered professional learning that is tailored to their actual needs. One comment I always put in with every report to all of my leaders is begin to curate your own artifact library,
Mm,
because there's nothing more empowering than when your people see their peers work to drive that change. So
Like,
we just got to do a better job. And it comes back to the whole branding piece. There's too much BS and baloney out there and not enough substance.
yeah, I
And
agree.
and I
substance. Great.
and I've been called out because I am big on research. I am big on substance.
Yep.
But I want to combine that
Hmm.
to the innovation, to the practice.
Yeah. Eric, you talked about consistency and competency. Is that correct?
Consistency and continuity, but I'm sure Eric remembered that.
There you
Those
go.
two.
Consistency. He probably did. Consistency, continuity, and I want to put one more C word on there because I'm a sucker for alliteration. Clarity. And I think that that's what your this podcast is really bringing to our listeners is to have a very clear focus. And I think that there's a lot of shiny. You mentioned snake oil. You mentioned there's a lot of peripheral stuff that's constantly like bombarding our school districts and our in our classrooms. And I feel like teachers have to, I don't know if there's some kind of like obligation. I don't know why. I don't know, like a fear of saying no. And like, so we just like school boards just grab a hold of something and they have a blank check and they put it in and they go to conferences maybe and they go to these booths, Eric, I don't know. And then they just like do this, do this, do this. And it takes bold leaders to be able to have that modicum of clarity. I think technology is wonderful, but I just don't think to scale it's being done correctly with a student in mind, the learning in mind. I just don't think is there on a national level. And Eric, your message to school districts, your message to what you share is so needed. And it's almost like before you buy anything, listen to Sheninger, listen to what he's doing, and make sure that there is a clear purpose of what you're trying to put in classrooms because it's just way too damn distracting. Worster, what do you think, man?
Oh no,
No,
no.
I,
I gotta say two things.
Yes,
First off,
sir.
I gotta give you some positive reinforcement. The third C, which should be the first,
Oh,
clarity,
sure.
is spot on. That is honestly, when you really think about it, I'm looking for clarity in the classroom.
Yeah.
I'm looking for clarity in leadership. That clarity should be in your vision. It should be in your action plans. It should be in your goals. It should also be in your accountability mechanisms.
Mm,
Um, so as we think about that, and I will say this too, you know what? I don't want people to listen to me. My goal, and I did this today with teachers and administrators, I want to ask the right questions to lead people to their own reflection of what they're doing well but more importantly, where they can grow their practice. And one question I usually use with technology is how could or how was technology used in a purposeful way to enhance the learning experience?
Mhm.
Then I connect that back to, cognition, levels of thinking. Now, notice I'm not saying rigor anymore
Yep.
because we have to have the same different words for the same thing, same meaning.
You do.
But asking the right questions. Also, how could data or how was data used to group, regroup, target instruction, to differentiate? How does your culture, this comes back, Nathaniel, to your
Mm.
initial conversation about your son, how
Mm.
does your culture make learning relevant, meaningful, authentic? So I think the right questions are better than answers. And, to be totally blunt, the reason I was asked to write digital leadership back in 2014
Mm.
was actually, no, 2012, maybe 14, I can't remember. 2012 was because there was a dire need to provide that guidance.
Yeah.
Then we did the new edition in 2019, but when we look now, the problem is still there. We
Mm.
buy, the what? We buy the stuff. We
Yep.
buy the stuff with a lack of clarity
Yep.
on the why. Then there is a lack of continuity and consistency in how we implement it. And
Yeah.
the what do we get? We get a glorified digital pacifier in some cases
Mm.
that is becomes a very expensive digital worksheet.
Yes.
I say all this knowing full well that there are some amazing examples of educators, schools, and systems doing incredible, effective work with technology and a slew of practices. However, the challenge is scalability. And that's the one thing we need to work on because every student deserves a world-class learning experience. Notice I didn't say education because then
Mm.
that's doing that to the kid. We want a
Mm.
world-class learning experience.
That's
So Eric,
right. And that's what a good guru does. He asks good questions. There you go.
here's my last question on what you just said. I think educators are still trying to catch up to the technology of 20 years ago. You mentioned everyone has a device now, thanks, I guess, in part to COVID. I don't think educators have caught up to how to use the laptop device effectively that all their students might now have. Technology moves at such a rapid pace. AI is revolutionizing our society. How in the world can education, with its being so a massive bureaucracy, how will our teachers ever keep pace with all the technology that's always changing so very quickly?
Well, that's the challenge. And let me tell you what you would see. Go to any major tech conference. If there is 50 apps in 50 minutes, that will be a line out the door you can't get in.
Mm.
However, if there's digital pedagogy for deeper learning, oh, there's going to be plenty of seats available.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to change our mindset where it's not about learning the latest gadget. It's not about getting our badges, our swag, and all that stuff. Because I'll tell you right now, I'm using the same 3 tools that I've been using for the last 10 plus years
Mm.
in all of my sessions. When we think about doing things well, do 1 or 2 things, focus on that. Because if you're juggling, it's hard to juggle unless you're focusing. Why jugglers are successful? They focus on one ball.
That's right.
And I think that's the key with the technology piece. It's not how much tech you use. My go-to tools are Mentimeter because I can use Menti 12 different ways. I learned one tool. The next is Padlet. I love using Padlet because again, I can get everyone to respond. I can have multiple questions. I can have my wall. And the third is the good old Google form because then I can create some image and graphing from that. I don't need anything else. But here's the key. I can use that to get students or adults to do a written response on a picture prompt. I could have them analyze a quick video clip. I can have them comment after they're discussing in person. I can model going back to the practices we want to see, reviewing prior learning, checks for understanding, closure. I always do an exit ticket.
Yeah.
And guess what I do? I'll do my exit ticket with AI. I'll create a, no, I'm sorry, exit ticket with Mentimeter. I'll create the PDF of the open-ended responses, and then I'll have AI analyze it and tell me what are the three main areas that teachers or administrators felt they did well at, but what are the three things that they need to do? And bam, I
Bam.
now have actionable data that I can use as a coach or a follow-up session. So, Eric, to your question, we're trying to do too much. We're not focusing on, are we planning effective lessons and experiences? Are we using effective strategies? How are we gleaning insights from what we did? And then how are we creating our own personalized paths to growth? You focus on those four things with or without technology, but then ask ourselves, how can technology support and enhance what we should already be doing? And have a toolbox, not even a toolbox.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3 at the most. So you
Like a
don't
tool
lose.
belt. Like,
Yeah.
Great answer. Love it. Nathaniel, do you want to give him the last question? Because we are.
Yeah, man. No, hey, no, Eric, this has been outstanding, man. I really appreciate our banter. We've talked about. I'm going to do closure right now. You ready? I'm going to do some closure. So, so we talked about your background and experience. Staten Island, not Long Island. My bad. I'm sorry, all you Staten Islanders. Sorry about that. Better pizza too. We talked about your awesome work, especially with your brand work. That's really a cool thing, and I don't think principals understand that enough. And to Worcester's point, yes, there's a lot of BS car salesmen that are out there, but if the data doesn't match the dialogue, it's absolutely invalid. So I really appreciate that conversation. And then just trying to keep things simple, like clarity, like you talked about with these resources. It's not going away. God only knows what 2 years from now, even next year, is going to be looking like with new innovations. And I think that's what the best learners do. The best leaders are the best learners. The best learners are the best leaders. And Eric Sheninger, you are a guru because you ask good questions, my man. So very good. So thank you very much for joining me, my man.
I got 3 questions.
Oh, he's got 3 questions.
Because Eric said you were going to ask the final question, but now
Oh,
since you brought up questions,
they
I'm
did.
gonna end us with 3.
Let's do it.
And I think these 3 questions are so powerful, yet they're broad to get us to really have that clarity in terms of what we want to accomplish. And I'm going to use Simon Sinek's golden circle as the motivation.
All right.
Why do we do things the way we do them? How might we do things more effectively? What evidence tells us that what we are doing is successful? And I think if we use those 3 questions with anything that we've talked about, branding, technology, personalization, pedagogy, it can help provide that needed clarity that can result into actionable goals that can help us grow and improve.
That's a closure. That's a closure right there. Good job, man. Drop the mic.
I as a guru, I have to step up sometimes because
do it. You just gotta grow a beard. Just grow a beard.
People, I had one, but I gotta get up on this pedestal once in a while so that I can just kick myself off because I get to learn just as much, if not more, from the people that I work with, and that's why I'm very fortunate to do what I do.
That's right, man. Best leaders are the best learners. Eric, hang back with us just for a little bit. We'll go ahead and close out and get you out of here. So thank you very much for joining us on this wonderful, wonderful tech-focused episode of the Community Connection. Take care.